name is Robert Ozzimo. I proudly represent the company of Harcourts, Rata and Co. And I'm joined here today by some of my award-winning colleagues in blue. Should you require their advice, please feel free to approach either Andrew, who's walking out right on cue, Ravi, Con, and of course, Leon El-Assaad, who no doubt you've had the great opportunity of becoming acquainted with throughout the marketing campaign. Buyers, let me share with you the following announcements, which in place can be bid and buy with absolute confidence here today. The auction will be conducted in accordance with the rules and any additional conditions that were made available for inspection before the start of the auction. The auction rules prohibit an auctioneer from accepting bids or offers for a property after the property has been knocked down to the successful bidder. The vendors have a reserve price. As the auctioneer, I'll indicate bidders on request. The law prohibits disruptions by bidders and prohibits bidders attempting to prevent others from bidding and provides for fines for such conduct. The rules permit for vendor bids. The words I'll use during the auction to indicate that I'm making a bid on behalf of the vendor are vendor bid, and by law only I, as the auctioneer, can make a vendor bid. The contract of sale has been on display prior to today's auction. We call for 10% deposit upon the fall of the hammer and the signing of that contract to take place here today, with the balance to be paid at settlement in a flexible 60 to 90 days time, at which time the vendor will provide the lucky buyer with vacant possession of the property. All in all, quite a straightforward contract. Everything is in here. Everything is quite clear. So buyers, is with my highest recommendation what we offer for your consideration and competition here today. Here in Rosemary Drive, they hardly build them like this anymore. A beautiful elevated blonde brick veneer, plenty of space. This was built to stand the test of time, and in the market itself, the infrastructure that we see surrounding us here today has provided so much capital growth in LALOR in recent years. Access to absolutely everything that you need to secure that capital growth and to provide a great lifestyle for you and your family, whether you be a first home buyer, an investor, or again, a family looking for your next family home to get the sold sticker on the board. The opportunity is right here and right now, buyers. Where can I see a fair and reasonable starting bid for number 69 Rosemary Drive?
705.
At 705,000, we'll go with you at 705. At 705,000 now, fairly been offered at 705 the bid. At 705. At 705,000, fairly been offered now at 705 the bid. Once at 705,000, are we done? I will take 5 at 710, same courtesy at 5 if you like. At 15 now, at 715,000, at 715 in the bids there, 715,000, at 20 now, at 720, at 725 now, at 725 the bid, at 725,000, 30 now, at 730, we're on the market and selling, at 730,000, I'm not going inside, at 730 the bids there, at 32 now, at 732,000, 35, at 735 the bid, at 40 now, at 740,000, 45, at 745 the bid, at 745,000, at 48, 748, 50, an easy decision at 50 got, at 750,000, at 750,000, fairly been offered, hard limit there, it looks like at 750, at 750,000, bids there, keys are there, no halftime break here today. If you're waiting for me to go inside and seek instructions, I won't be doing that here today. My instructions have been sought and given. We are on the market, we are selling, playing for keeps, not going inside at 750,000. The bid's there, the keys are there, we sell away at 5 now at 755. At 755,000, almost had it, sir, man, at 755. Bid me now if you're here to buy at 755,000. If you have come to buy, you must bid me now or forever hold your peace at 755. The bid's here. Opportunity with you here, sir, but 755, the keys are back there. At 755,000. You work so hard to get yourself in this position. At 56 now, 756,000 on the phone. At 756. At 58, welcome back at 58. At 758 the bid. At 758,000. At 758,000, can't see you there, sir. 758 the bid. At 59. At 759 and make it 60 now. At 759,000 the bid there, 60 got. At 65, welcome and best of luck at 65. At 765,000. At 66, at 766,000, make it 70, sir. At 766,000, bid there, keys are there, opportunity with you. One bid not enough here today. $766,000 the bid. Once at 766, are we done? At 67, welcome back at 67. At 767,000, round me off to 70. At 767,000, the bid's there. At 70, welcome back at 70. At 770,000. At 770,000, bid there. I'll be back in front. At 771,000 once. At 771, are we done? At 72 now, 772,000 against your bidder, Ange. At 772. At 772,000, bid back there at 772 now. Are we done here, sir? 73. At 73, welcome back at 73. At 773,000, bids here now, keys are here. At 74 now, 774. At 774 the bid now. At 774,000, fairly been offered against your bid, sir, at 74. At 774,000, once. At 774, done. Twice. At 75 and welcome back at 75. How about 80? Small bids aren't working, sir. At 775,000. At 775,000, bids there at 1 at 76. At 776 now. At 776,000. 777 sounds great, sir. At 776,000, bids behind. Opportunity with you now at 777 now, 777s. At 777, bids there, we done. At 777,000, how about 80 in the rise? At $777,000 the bid. Once at 777, done. 78. At 78 now. At 778 now. At 778,000, the bid's back here now. At 80 now, welcome, best of luck, never too late to the hammer falls. It's a late run, hopefully it counts. At 780,000. At 780,000. Can't let him bite with one bid, sir. You work so hard to put yourself in that position to have those keys, not to let someone waltz in at the very end and take it with one bid. At 780,000, I urge you to test their resolve. At 780,000, the bid's there. At 81 now, at 781. At 781,000, welcome back at 81. At 781, the bid. 82 now at 782. At 782,000, 3 or 4 still in it at 782. At 782,000, 85 now at 785. At 785,000, how about on the phone, Andrew? We've done that. 785,000 bids there, across the road, 785. Opportunity here and here with you, sir, at 785,000. At 785,000, any instructions there, Con at 785. At 785,000, bid there, which Ravi at 785. Once at 785,000, done. 86 now, 786, 90 if you like, at 786,000. At 786,000, bid there, at 786. At 786,000, sir, be bold, give me a big bid. At 786,000, bid there. It was a late run. You wanted to count at 786. Dig deep right now if you want to buy it. 786,000, waiting on instructions there. At 786. At 786, the bid now. 87 now, 787. 87 I have already here at 87, 88 now, at 788, at 788 the bid, at 788,000, bid there at 788. 89 now, 789, at 790 now, at 790 the bid now, 790,000 fairly been offered, bid there, cross the road, 790. Are you absolutely sure? You've been so strong, so don't let me just yet. Pointy end now, at 790,000. So how about we just rip it off and say 800? One last big roll of the dice. At 91, at 791, at 791,000 now, at 791,000, bid there at 91. He tells me he's out, you've beat one at 92 now, at 792, at 792 the bid, at 792,000, fairly been offered, Andrew's off the phone, that's one out, at 792,000, 796,000 now, fairly been offered at 796 the bid, once at 796, are we done? I had it here first, but I'm going to go with the 98. That solves the problem at 798. At 798,000, the bid's there in the centre. I didn't want to play favourites, so I'll go with the higher number. The higher number is always my favourite. At 798. At 798,000, 99 now and 800 beckons. At 799, who's going to be brave? Who's going to say it first? At 799, the bid's there. Got to be 800 in the rise. Once at 799,000. Done. 106,000 at 806 the bid now, $806,000 the bid at 806,000, bid back there, opportunity with you at 806,000 now, 806, fairly been offered, on the market and selling, bids there, keys are there, 806 the bid, 808 now at 808, at 9, at 10, at 810,000, 11, 811, 12, 13, 14, 15's after 14, at 814,000 now, might stop there, 814 the bid, first call at 814, 16, we skipped 15 at 816,000, how about 20 sir, 816 the bid, at 816,000, fairly been offered now at 816, at 816,000, bid there, keys are there, we're on the market, we're selling, $816,000 the bid, Once at 816. Are we done? Twice at 816,000. At 17 now. How about 20, ma'am, in the rise? 18 at 818,000. At 818 in the bids back here at 818,000. Fairly been offered. Bids there, keys are there. We sell here today. 808 at 818,000. At 19 now at 819. At 20 the quick retort. At 820,000. At 21 at 821 the bid. At 821,000. Has he done enough now at 821? At 821,000 bid back there. Keys are there. Opportunity still with you. Haven't sold it yet, but we're about to. At 821 the bid. For the first call at 821,000. All done. Second call 821. Done. Finished. Third. Final call 800 at 22. Welcome back. We're at 21, so it's 22, at 822 now, at 822,000, and we're back in it over here, sir, at 822. Best responsible small bid's a big one, at 25 now, at 825 the bid, at 825,000, at 825,000. Big bid might just get it for you here. 825 the bid, fairly been offered. Can't buy like that, just like this at 825. Are we absolutely sure? 825,000 now. Fairly been offered. You've told me that a couple of times. We have some trust issues now, sir. At 825,000, I'll need to know definitively whether you're in or out. At 825, the bid's there, keys are there. Need to know. Once at 825, done. Twice at 825,000, done. Finished. Third. Final call at 826,000 now. First call at 826, all done. Second call, 826,000, done. Finished.
27.
At 28, at 828. Straight back at you at 828,000 now. At 828, the quick retort at 828. At 828,000, fairly been offered now. Bids there, keys are there. 828,000, bid me now, sir, if you want to buy. Can I say 30 in the rise? At 828,000, fairly been offered. How are we going over there, Con? At 828, we're definitely done. Still on the phone. I'll come back to you at 828. At 828,000, bid there. What do you say? At 828, the bid?
28.5.
28.5. 9 at 829. $5,000 bids make it so easy for the competition to come along. Make it at least 30 in the rise. At 829,000, the bid's there. Can I say 30 now, sir? At 30. At 31. At 831. Might take a bigger bid, sir, to break the gridlock. At 831,000, bids there. It's back against you at 31. At 831,000, remains here for the time being. Keys are here, bids here. $831,000 the bid. Once at 831, done. Twice at 831,000, done. Finished. Third. Final call, $831,000 the bid. All done. All finished. Silent out. 831,000. I'll assume she's out. She's no longer here. At 831. So you're definitely done. Off the phone, that's a big sign. Definitely done. Thanks very much for your spirited bidding here today. 830 been offered at 836. At 836,000 now it's come down to this, so you need to know. At 836 the bid, fairly been offered now. 836,000. We're on the market. We sell. 836 the bid. Once at 836, done. Twice. 836,000, done and finished. Third, final call. $836,000 the bid, all done, all finished, all silent, all out. 836,000. So if you tell me you're out, I'm going to sell. Yeah. You're definitely done? Are you absolutely, you're hard to read with those glasses. Show me your eyeballs and tell me you're out. You're definitely done? Yeah. Thank you very much for your bidding here today. At 836,000, they tell me they're all out. First of all, Harcourts, Rata and Co-auction. Have a great